Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking the Doctor Who episode Flatline. And I have to say, I think I supplants last week's episode as my favorite of the season so far. It's just a good, fun Doctor Who episode with a really interesting idea at its core. There's plenty of really funny moments, there's some good character stuff going on, and there's also some nice scary action. As far as one-shot episodes go, you really can't ask for more. And of course, we do get a little bit of a nod to the overall story arc of the season, but it's a very subtle one. Anyway, basically the whole point of this episode is to really kind of get the Doctor and Clara's relationship back at 100%, more or less. Basically, kind of get them to the point where Clara is okay with being the Doctor's companion again fully. She isn't having these reservations. And we got to see the start of that last episode, and this is the culmination of all of that. So, Clara 100% back on board with being a companion. Now, the other thing about this episode was it was also furthering the idea of Clara kind of understanding where it is the Doctor comes from. Last episode really was about her having to realize why the Doctor can't always be nice to people, and that the Doctor is someone who is often put in terrible situations where all of his choices are bad, but he, being who he is the one that has to make those decisions. And of course, last episode was reminded that yes, sometimes people have to be sacrificed for the greater good. Now here it's much more direct. Clara is sort of having to step in there and be the one in the Doctor's shoes, the one who kind of makes some of these decisions. And look at what she does. She ends up having to lie to people. She sees that sometimes the people who are good die and the people who are bad live. So, it's very much an instance of Clara really has to walk a bit of a mile in the Doctor's shoes. And seeing that really kind of drives it home what it's like for her. And then there's the whole thing that, she basically Clara gets busted for lying to Danny. And again, sort of it sinks into her that, Clara maybe doesn't have quite as strong a moral position to judge the Doctor as she thought she did. Speaking of, the bad characters, did you notice that the crabby and possibly racist old man was played by the dude who was the broker in Guardians of the Galaxy? Like the jewelry store guy that Star-Lord was trying to sell stuff to. Yeah, it's that guy. I just think it's that kind of awesome that somebody from Guardians of the Galaxy is in Doctor Who. But hey, we've got John Barrowman over on Arrow, my favorite show, and Arrow is so awesome. So anyway, I'm getting back to this episode. Not a huge amount of things to say about our aliens this episode, who the Doctor ultimately ends up naming the Boneless. Now, I love the idea of these guys as a concept. It's weird, it's creepy, it kind of feels like the sort of thing some of the really out there writers that I enjoy, like Grant Morrison or Warren Ellis, would pull out. In fact, it also even kind of reminds me a little bit of the famous H.P. Lovecraft story, The Color Out of Space. And if you're familiar with that story, you might kind of get where I'm coming from on that one. I just kind of wish they could have come up with a better name for these aliens than the Boneless, because one, being from two-dimensional space, it would be a little odd if they had bones. So they're like, yeah, if some of those aliens do end up back in their own dimension, they're like, what the hell's a bone? Also, just the name the Boneless kind of reminds me of Ivar the Boneless, which is the name of a famous Viking. But I watch an unholy amount of the History channels, so I know things like that. But anyway, not too much to say else about Clara. One thing though, I guess the Rigsy, or whatever the heck that kid's name was, keeps talking about, the estates and whatnot. So I'm assuming that this is basically what the UK version of what we in America would call the projects. And apparently the projects over in the UK seem to be nicer than the ones here in America, because the place they're running around, one, the guy that dies at the very beginning of the episode, is it just weird that guy actually have a pretty nice looking apartment? And two, just sort of the area they're in general. I mean, yeah, it's maybe not the prettiest place around, but unlike the projects in America, it doesn't sort of look like the place where there's going to be a crack dealer around every corner and where murders happen on a pretty much weekly basis, sometimes even daily. Well, let's just take people shooting each other over drugs as a matter of routine. Yeah. So, again, that's just sort of my personal observation as a foreign member of the foreign audience on that one. Also, kind of cool that the Doctor Who has popped over to Bristol. I'm not aware of a Doctor Who story ever taking place in that city before, so that's kind of cool. Let me see, what else? No, nothing else particularly to say about sort of the ancillary characters. Not a huge amount to say about Danny, other than the fact that boy oh boy is Clara going to have some explaining to do next episode. You kind of feel sad for Danny. Clara's lying to him. The Doctor does not respect him very much. So, girlfriend lying to her. The guy that your girlfriend is lying to you to go hang out with thinks you're a complete and utter tool. Yeah, it kind of sucks to be Danny. Now, a lot of people have observed that the TARDIS in siege mode, which is a thing we have never seen before, and you'd think that this is something the Doctor would have pulled before in more than a few instances that I can think of. But then again, hey, you never know. Maybe this is something he's installed in the TARDIS lately. Maybe it's an upgrade he's put in there in more recent years that wasn't available to past Doctors. But it's kind of hard to look at the TARDIS in siege mode and not think of the Pandorica, which may or may not be a deliberate thing on the Doctor's part. In fact, though, if it is true that this is some sort of recent upgrade to the TARDIS, that may have actually been something the Doctor did deliberately for whatever reason. Also, it kind of reminds me of was it that lament thing from the Hellraiser movies? But anyway, now this episode again we get some really hysterical stuff from Peter Capaldi. We get to see him doing the little thing with his hands, kind of reminiscent of the Addams Family, and just the whole miniature TARDIS thing is pretty hilarious. And him peeking out of the door. I mean, there's a load of comedy there. We even get to see the Doctor's victory dance, which is also quite hysterical. And then we get to have that little sort of great Doctor speech at the end of the episode, very reminiscent of the sort of speeches like that we get from Matt Smith and David Tennant. The Doctor. I was actually surprised the Doctor didn't actually mention the Shadow Proclamations, but then again, these being from another dimension would have no idea what the hell that is. So it's sort of, I guess he was just saving his breath there. But oh man, Peter Capaldi just completely cranked that one up to 11 when he was doing that. Just very, very nice and shouty, the way the Doctor often gets when he's really, really pissed off. And again, we do see that the Doctor even says, some of you might even survive. Which just reminds us that, the Doctor generally will do everything he can to avoid killing enemies, but, sometimes some eggs get broke. Sometimes, you gotta break a few break some eggs to make an omelet. And this kind of brings us back to that little thing that the Doctor says to Clara at the end of the episode, where he says to her, that she did a good job as the Doctor. And then he just sort of basically goes on to clarify that that's not necessarily a good thing. And I know some people are a little confused about this, but I'm pretty sure what the Doctor is saying there is that being the Doctor, doing those things, saving people, stopping the aliens and all that, that's not always the same as being the moral on the level that you would prefer to be. Sometimes as the Doctor, he, as we've said, he can't always be kind. Sometimes he has to sacrifice other people. Sometimes he has to make terrible choices that lead to bad consequences in order to prevent even worse things from happening. And seeing the graffiti crew people get killed and not being able to save them, and having to lie to those people, and seeing the big jerk old man survive when the nicer people got killed. Well, again, it's all about the idea that Clara still hasn't given the Doctor an answer. Am I a good man? Well, Clara's got a little bit more of an idea of what it's like to be the Doctor now, so maybe she's in a better position to give the Doctor that answer that he's been wanting. And I think more importantly, it's the answer he's been needing. I think it might even be kind of the big reason why the 11th Doctor asked her to stick with him. Not just because of the fact that obviously the 12th Doctor is going to be scared of, basically being abandoned so new into his regeneration, but maybe the 11th Doctor had a sense that when he was going to change, that he was going to have a very radical shift in his personality, and that he, the 11th Doctor, might not exactly approve of who he was going to become. I mean, again, that's speculation on my part, but it's an idea worth considering. So anyway, we've got one more episode before the big two-parter season finale, and this episode does bring Missy back into the mix, and I don't really have anything to say about her watching Clara on her iPad. Just that seems like a good way to start gearing towards the season finale. And let me see here. Nope, I think that covers everything that I had to say this episode. Once again, guys, really great episode. Had a lot of fun watching it, and I'm definitely looking forward to see getting some answers as to what's going on about Missy and such. Anyway, guys, as always, please comment, rate, and subscribe, and of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Who's Your Jedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.